There is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that will lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of the comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. I want to start today with what is a provocative, but I think rather true idea. IQ, no doubt, is going to help you launch your career. It's probably going to help you get hired. But here's the controversial thing. It's probably not going to help you get very far. So in fact, the higher you go in the organization, the more you need relationship skills or emotional intelligence, we might say. So how do you actually begin to develop those emotional intelligence skills? How do you know if you've gotten enough of those skills or not? And more importantly, how do you keep your IQ from being a barrier to your success? Now, I know that sounds a little crazy, but stay with me because I think that's a really important concept. So my guest today is Margaret C. Andrews. She's a seasoned executive, academic leader, speaker, instructor, created and teaches a variety of leadership courses and professional executive programs at Harvard University. She's the founder of Mylo, M-Y-L-O Center, which is a private leadership development firm. And their clients include some of the big ones: Amazon, Citibank, Continental, Walmart, Wayfair, and the United Nations. Our most recent book we're talking about is Managing Yourself to Lead Others. So Margaret, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure talking with you. So why did you get interested in this topic enough to write a book on it? You have enough going on between your teaching and your own business. Like, why this book?
Yeah, I had people ask me for a long time, when are you going to write the book? And I said, never. I had no interest in it. So it started off as a class, a 15-week class with papers and lots of reading and those kinds of things. And then it became a 2-day executive program, and that has been very successful. I created a speech on it. And so each one kind of gets out to a broader audience, and it seemed like the next one was to do a book. So so now it came out, but it was definitely a longer process, as you probably know, than you think it's going to be. And I think it's one of those things, just like most entrepreneurial things, is that if you had known how difficult and how long it would take, you might not have started. So sometimes ignorance is a good thing.
I can testify that you're accurate on all of those, and that as hard as the writing is of a book, which is a process in itself, the selling of a book is a completely other issue. But that's not our topic for today. Let's get back to this notion of what it is. How do you keep your IQ from really getting in your way? You start the book with a story about James, which was a bit of an inspiration for you. Tell me that story.
Yeah. So in the Mylo class or the executive program, we use a case, and we were discussing this case, and it's about Dr. Ron Ventura, and he is a brilliant surgeon, very skilled. We love what he does. He's raising the reputation of the hospital and revenues and these kinds of things. And he's also has some terrible interpersonal skills. So he's yelling at people in the operating theater, and he's bullying people. And right. So we have this thing. So we take the perspective of his boss, a hospital administrator, and we have to decide, what do we do with this guy? Do we keep him and try to coach him and so we can keep the best part? Or do we cut him loose because this is really bad news? And so there's just a very impassioned debate going on in the classroom, with very strong arguments on both sides. And so we're narrowing it down, and we're kind of coming to a conclusion. And just as we're doing that, I notice a hand that's raised in the back of the room. Wallace Giants. And he's been in the program the whole time, but he hasn't spoken for the whole 2 days. So of course I call on him. And he says, "I'm Dr. Ventura." And it was just like you would see in the movies, where everybody all together turned around to look at him. And so then he realizes what he said. And he said, "Oh, I'm not the real Dr. Ventura." He said, "I'm an engineer, not a surgeon." But he said, pretty much everything else in that case could have been written about me. He said, I was recently passed over for a promotion. And he said, hearing this discussion and reading this case, he said, I see what my behaviors look like. And he said, it's horrifying. And I will say that was probably the bravest thing I've ever heard somebody say in a classroom. And I will also say what was a super surprise until I thought about it was that he was the most popular person to talk to at the break. Everybody wanted to talk to him that's when it hit me that there's a lot more people, a lot more Ron Venturas out there. And there are also a lot of people that fear they might be a Ron Ventura. So they wanted to talk to him.
Well, and the other half of the population is working with a manager that is a Ron Ventura and trying to figure out, how do I get through this? I remember as I was just launching my book, You Can't Know It All, partly inspired by people like Ron Ventura, who are deep technical experts, hugely valuable to the company in a host of ways, but who were not the easiest personalities to deal with. Okay, and right, wrong, any rate, I did a conference with a whole room full, like hundreds of HR leaders, and I presented these cases, these real cases about these individuals with these personalities who are enormous contribution, making tons of money for the company in so many different ways, but who are a bit problematic. And the question is, what do you want to do with them? But the HR staff pretty much uniformly in the room were ready to strangle me that I even posed the question of, do you keep them? Now, if I talk to the CEOs in the world, they will say, oh, no, I need those people. So it's this interesting balance we have between people whose personality is not the most interpersonally savvy, but who make a contribution, and then what do we do with them? When do we stop promoting them? When do we sanction them? When do we let them go? How do we nurture them? How do we grow them? I mean, exactly the same story as you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. And that is why when we discuss that case, there is so much debate and very strongly held opinions on both sides of that argument. So it's always a case that gets a lot of attention.
I get it. So where did James end up? He says, I recognize myself in this case, and everybody wants to talk to him at break. Did you follow him? Do you know what happened afterwards?
I did.
Did he change? What happened?
Yeah. So when I was writing the book, I reached out to him and I said, hey, that really left an impression on me. Well, actually what happened in between was he came back about 6 months later to take another program with me. And when he walked in, he goes, do you remember me? And I said, oh, yes. I will never forget you, right? And so then I called or reached out to him, and I interviewed him for the book, and I said I'd really like to tell that story, and he said, "Yeah, okay, that's fine." And so we changed his name, but he did get that promotion I think it was the following year, and then within 4 years he had 2 more promotions. So he really took this to heart, and he really did the work. It was a huge wake-up call for him. I think just the fact that he didn't get that promotion, and then when he came and heard that discussion, it was a real wake-up for him.
Yeah, I think the discussion, hearing people debate about it, is probably more eye-opening than anything else that you could have done for him, any 360, because we can discount 360 or a whole bunch of other things that are going with it. All right, so it puzzles me. I see hundreds of these characters in any given year, every year, pretty much consistently rather, who think that their IQ skills are what make them deserve that next promotion. So I want your view. Why is it that the interpersonal skills are so essential?
Yeah. So, but you're absolutely right. We hear, maybe it's not said this way, but this is what's meant is, well, I'm the smartest person in the room, so I should get this promotion. But as we know, and maybe some of us have worked with these people, that you take, for example, the smartest engineer or the best engineer or the best accountant, and you raise them up to lead the group. That doesn't mean they're going to be good at it. And so I run this exercise in the programs that I do about, I ask people, I said, think about the best boss. Get one person in mind. And if you're listening to this, I encourage you to do this. Get one person in mind and then start a list of all the reasons why this person was your best boss. The big reasons, the small reasons, the ones you think only you cared about, whatever it is, right? But there's loads of reasons. And you have to break down those, those ones that say, oh, this person was a great leader. And I say, oh, what does that mean, right? It has to be more specific. So anyway, and there's many. I've run this exercise for, oh gosh, well over a decade, and with thousands of people across the globe. And so what I found is that before I get there, let me just say that it can be all kinds of different things. That it can be that they were the smartest person you've ever worked with, or it could be that they were the best engineer or the best accountant, or, something like that. But it can also be other things like, they gave you the benefit of the doubt, or they, challenged you appropriately, or whatever. So if you're doing your list, keep going, go for, as many as you can get. And then maybe you pause it here, then go to the top three. So you circle or star or highlight whatever it is, the top three, the real reasons that made the difference, why this person made the list and not somebody else. And then, I tell people there are these three buckets that they usually fall into. And the first one is around intelligence. And, and I ask people, how many of your top three were in there? And most people, it's 0 or 1, with more zeros than ones. And the second area is technical and functional skills. And those are, they were the best at search engine optimization or surgery or whatever it is, kind of those hard skills. And, how many there? Zeros and ones, generally with more zeros than ones. And then the last bucket is interpersonal skills, also called relationship skills, soft skills, emotional intelligence, superpowers, whatever you want to call it. And that is the one that has the majority of reasons. And so this was happening all again and again and again. So I just thought, this always happens, but I should take note. I should figure out, well, how many of them are there? So I started keeping track of it, and it turns out that 85% of the reasons that people give for their best boss are in that third bucket, in that interpersonal skills, relationship skills. And the remaining 15% is pretty evenly split between IQ and those technical and functional skills. And so I do want to say, it doesn't mean that IQ and technical and functional skills are not important, because that's what got you oftentimes to where you are. But so there are more threshold skills. You have to have a certain level of those to be in that position. But from then on, it's the interpersonal skills that really make the difference.
I like to tell a story on this one. So I'm stealing your thunder for a moment, but I think it will reinforce what you're saying. 2 people up for a promotion. The boss is not going to make co-heads. So one of them's going to get it, one of them's not going to get it. One person, we'll say person A, is technically the strongest without a doubt. Internally, everybody would agree, and including the other candidate will agree, this person is technically more competent than I am. In fact, person B will often go to person A and say, I don't know how to do this. Can you show me how to do this? There's no question. Okay? Person B, not technically as competent. All right? We end up giving the job to person B. Person A, furious, as you can well imagine. What on earth? How is this going? Et cetera, et cetera. And the deciding boss, in this case, explained it in the following way. Is that person A will fret and fret and fret and fret, and kind of it doesn't move forward, sort of driving for perfection or whatever else is driving that. Person B will get everybody mobilized, get people organized, get people doing things, doesn't have to have the answer themselves, but can move it through an organization because they are pretty good at just getting people on board and moving forward. And the latter are the skills and need. Not the technical skills. And that's what I see day in and day out.
Yes. And I think that a lot of times, particularly in STEM types of jobs, that there is a sense that I'm the smartest person in the room and have been my whole career kind of thing. And that will carry me through. But then to your point, person A didn't get the job. And that is a moment where they can say, hey, that's not fair. Or they can say, let me pick this apart and see why it happened.
Yeah. Well, we won't do the conclusion on that story because it did not go very well in that case. I see also people who are indeed the smartest person in the room, let's say on strategy. They can see ahead of the curve faster than anybody else, get there quicker, and I will give them 99% of the time they're right. But if you leave people feeling that they're not smart enough, they're not following you very far.
Agreed. Absolutely. I remember somebody once said to me, they said, would you rather be right or would you rather be effective? And it means that you don't have to have all the right answers. You have to be effective. You have to be able to marshal other people to get to the right answer, which oftentimes is not your answer. And that takes a lot of humility.
Well, it may be, but you also may have to compromise a little bit in order to get everybody else with you and moving forward in some interesting ways. All right, so the best boss exercise. So you think this is actually a really good exercise for people to do. You want to just write down, give us the description, how to go about doing this exercise real quickly as an individual?
So as an individual, as I say, think of that best boss, get that one person in mind, and then go for a long list. Right? At least 8 or 9 reasons, and, break them down. If you say they're a good communicator, well, what does that mean? Was it writing or speaking? And then, come with that long list. And you can do this with a group as well, by the way. And then if you are doing it with a group, you give everybody 3 Post-it notes and they write one of their top 3 reasons on each of those. And then you can put up a couple boards around the room and they put the Post-it note where it goes. And it's very clear what that third board around interpersonal skills is the one that is being weighed down.
Is really Okay, so let's focus on this. So this is all about getting people believing that the interpersonal skills is really the break point for their career, not just their IQ. Okay, let's say you have somebody convinced. Now what does the journey look like for developing those interpersonal skills? And you start with 6 questions. So tell me about those 6 questions.
Yeah, so the 6 questions are really aimed at understanding yourself. And a big part of that is, I'll say, understanding your backstory, that it took everything in your life to get you where you are now. Some of that was, was great, and some maybe not so great. So, but it's the 6th question. The first one is the big one that takes a very long time to really answer well, but also helps you answer the other ones. The first question is around who and whose thinking has shaped you as an individual. So this is, of course, parents and early caregivers, your family, your extended family, your friends when you were younger, your college roommates, boyfriends, girlfriends, these kinds of things. And I say to people, it's people that helped you, and it's also people that hurt you, because we are influenced by all of them. Our good bosses, our bad bosses, those kinds of things. So the people, but also the ideas. And this can come from, your religious community, the books you read, the movies you saw, the discussions that you've had, right? We all can remember times in our life where you walk in a room and when you walk out, you think completely differently. And those are things that impact you. The other is that, some people, a decent number of people have things in their past that are very uncomfortable for them. And I like to remember what C.S. Lewis, the British author, said, is that you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And I think that, that's such a powerful statement. So if you have things in your past that are uncomfortable and still make you mad, just remember, you get the final say, right? So that's question 1, the people and ideas. Second one is around situations and events that have shaped you, right? And I always say these are lucky and unlucky accidents. An unlucky accident is that car accident, or you forgot to foot balance sheet and it didn't foot or something like that. But the lucky accidents are also true. They're the time that you went by and said hello to somebody and it turned into something, a very different discussion. Or my favorite one, and I hear it a lot, is that somebody will say, I didn't want to go to that party, but my friend made me go. And that's where I met my spouse. So, super lucky accident. So that's question 2. The third question is around success. And that is, how do you define success in your personal life and your professional life? And this is not your parents' definition or, your spouse's definition or society's. It's yours. What does constitute success for you? And if it's a big thing, like I want to start a company or I want to, retire with this amount of money in the bank, the next question is, well, why? Why that number? Or why, right? What's underneath that? What do you mean by that? And some of that sort of points to the fourth question, which is around values. And that is, what are your core values? And I think this question would be very hard for a lot of people to answer as well, because we don't think about it very often. And, society and influencers and advertisers are constantly telling us what we should value. And so I have 2 ways that I tell people that are helpful to get underneath this question. And one is to, if we were to look at your calendar, what would we infer about your values, right? Because we oftentimes spend time in places that we value, whether it's with people or doing activities, right? So the calendar. The second one is to think about what makes you mad when you see it or hear it, read about it, whatever it is, and your blood is boiling. What are you reading or witnessing? Because why you're getting angry is oftentimes because somebody or something just stepped on a value, and that's why you're mad. So think about those things. So that's the fourth question. The fifth one is around, how well do you understand your own emotions and how you present when you're feeling those emotions? And, a quick test of that is, I'll ask people, who knows that you're angry first? You or the person you're with? And I said, if it's the person you're with, that's probably not good. So, how well do you do that? And the answer for most people is, oh, probably not so well. And then the sixth question is around, what feedback have you received in your life, personally and professionally? And because very oftentimes what we're doing at work that is good or bad is also what we're doing at home that is, appreciated or not appreciated. In fact, people oftentimes realize, oh, I hear from both my spouse and at work that I don't listen well. I'm like, right. Why didn't we bring that behavior with us?
Yeah.
But the other thing is, the feedback question goes oftentimes back to the question around emotions. Because if we hear people say that, gee, you're a hothead, or I can't read what you're thinking, or all of these things, very oftentimes it's because we're not fully aware of our own emotions. So all of those are kind of, I want to say, like a big messy Venn diagram of who we are.
So there are a lovely set of questions. So just to repeat, the who has shaped you and your thinking. So who have been the influencers in my life, and in what ways have those shaped me? And I'm supposing in that one, am I happy and not so happy about some of those influences?
Right. You can drop them.
Yes. The situations and events that have shaped you, either that have been lucky accidents or unlucky events. How you define success personally and professionally. Your values, and I love your question about what really makes you mad as an indication of your value. I think there are many ways to angle in that one. I really like that one. How well do you understand your emotions and what other people see in your emotional reactions? And then what feedback have you received personally and professionally? 6, great personal reflection questions. Now, why? Why that deep dive on on me in order to develop my interpersonal skills? Why is this the starting point?
Yeah. So it all kind of comes together as we understand ourselves, because understanding ourselves helps us be a little bit more rooted. I'll say grounded. so that we don't get buffeted by every single wind that goes by, right? We know who we are. We know what we care about. We know what we want. And that doesn't mean you don't compromise or something like that, but you know when you're going down a road that's not right for you. And so understanding that, first of all, that's around self-understanding. And then the second one is around self-management, right? Which is, if you think self-understanding is hard, let me tell you, self-management is harder. And this is, I oftentimes will use 3 questions on this one. The first one being, what type of leader are you now? How would you describe yourself as a leader? Or what words and phrases that you use or that other people use about you? Second question is, what type of leader would you like to become? Same idea, what words and phrases. And then the third question is around, so what's the delta? What's the difference between this leader and that leader? And so therefore, what do you need to do? And so those usually point to behaviors. I should really learn to delegate more. I should listen more intently, or what we hear a lot of these very commonly. But then you have to do it, right? You have to work on doing those. And it is very difficult to develop a new behavior. And so I talk about how we oftentimes think that when we are developing a new skill or behavior that we get better as we practice it. That's true, but it's not linear in any way. It's more like an S curve, right? So at the very beginning, you're not good at all. You don't know what you're doing. So you might read a book about it. You look around and see who's good at it. You might ask them for some coaching or tips or something. And then you put it into practice and you're making mistakes left, right, and center. But slowly it starts to come together and you get better slowly and then quickly, and then you let it off, right? Because you've mastered this behavior and now it's time to try another one. But what's hard is that sometimes when you're developing a new behavior, you get worse before you get better. And because it's knocking you out of your comfort zone. And, but that's part of getting better. And I think one of the hard parts is that people that are very high up in leadership have a harder time with those S curves because in the beginning, they're not very good. And guess what? More people see you fail. And that's embarrassing. So they think, oh, this is what got me here. And yes, Marshall Goldsmith always says, yes, but what got you here won't get you there.
Right. I think you're right that it is hard to do something that feels unnatural, that is out of your comfort zone. I think it's also hard to keep in mind why it's important to do something that is out of your comfort zone. So I think if you come back then to your initial best boss reminder, why am I doing this? What's the prize here? Because it often feels like the way I think and the way I act is the, quote, right way, because it's so natural to me. And I find breaking that sense of right or wrong is just essential in getting growth to happen.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing is that, we may have a certain style, right, which comes from all the things that have shaped us as we've grown up. And it may work for us, but it's not always going to work for us. That we have different people that report to us and they're all different individuals. So they're going to react differently to how we present. And sometimes it helps to change how we present.
Right. I find the senior leaders, the senior-most leaders, the ones that I admire the most, are the ones who are constantly looking for a micro adjustment that's going to get a better reaction from a broader range of people. So they're constantly asking for feedback. They're constantly asking, could I do that differently? And they're not looking like wholesale changes. They're looking, could I say that differently? Could I have handled that debate a little bit better? Did I miss an opportunity to say something I should have said? Those tiny adjustments are what I see the senior-most leaders doing kind of day in and day out. And, they'll have a moment where there's a big growth and then kind of a plateau and then another big growth. But it's that willingness to embrace that nobody's ever perfect on this interpersonal piece that I think is essential.
I agree with that. And I don't know, somebody once said, the best leaders are the best learners. And I think that is absolutely true. They're not there. They're still on the path.
Yeah. Well, I say leadership is a lifelong journey. There's like, if you think you've got it perfect, then quit. You're on the downhill path from that.
I
It's not a
agree,
really good
yes.
strategy. Okay. Do you have other exercises that you recommend people do? I mean, I love your questions, your 6 questions, and then the 3 specific questions, but are there other exercises?
Yeah, there's one that I think a lot of people find helpful. I call it the zigzag chart because you'll see why in a second. I have, all these, and you can create your own, right? These are the ones that I think are helpful. But you think about 2 poles of ways of behaving: introvert, extrovert, detail oriented, big picture, right? These different ones, and you go through on this continuum, and you say, well, where am I? Right. So you put, if it's a 1 to 10 scale, I'm a 7 towards this side or whatever. And then you connect all of yours all the way down. And so it looks like a zigzag. And then you think about, okay, the person I'm working with, maybe it's my boss or a peer or a subordinate. And then you say, to the best of your knowledge, where do you think they are on it? And so plot those and do their zigzag. And what you see is these kind of inner overlapping lines and things like that. So sometimes we're quite far apart and sometimes we're right next to each other. And far apart is not bad. That if you are an extrovert and I'm an introvert, it doesn't mean one of us has to change. It just means, okay, let me understand that about you. Or big picture or detail oriented. If we are different, when I'm explaining something to you, I may do it differently than I would want somebody to explain it to me. It's not a better or worse, it's a different. So I think, and I, did that for the first time when I was having a difficult relationship with somebody, and I was thinking, what do I do? What's going on? And it was very helpful. It was very helpful. Like, okay, so maybe if I explain this differently, it will be more understandable from their perspective.
I find too often people recognize the difference and then they want the other person to change because somehow the other person is not the ideal or not the best or not the right or not the whatever. Okay, we all have justifications. So what's your advice in that scenario?
Yeah, so I will tell you another story from the classroom that just answers this more beautifully than I ever could. We were having a discussion. I don't even remember what the discussion was about in the class, but there was a woman. She was sitting right in the front row, and she was explaining. She said, she said, I am an extrovert, and my right-hand person is an introvert. And she said, we are in one of those open offices with long tables. And she said, so she literally sits back to back to me, right? She's right behind me. And she said, I'm an extrovert. So every time I have an idea, I turn around and I tap her on the shoulder and I say, hey, I was thinking about this. Blah, blah, blah. And she'll give me, she'll say, oh, yeah, okay. She'll give me her thoughts. And then, anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours later, she'll say, hey, I thought about this a little bit more. And here's what I think. And she said, that's when it dawned on me that, she's an introvert. So she processes differently. And she said, so I changed what I did. She said, I send her a text and say, hey, so-and-so, thinking about this. Can we talk later today? And she said, it's awesome because she shows up, she's thought it through, etc. But that was great. But what was even better was somebody else in the classroom said, hey, wait a minute. Why do you do that? You're the boss. She should change to adapt to your style. And that's when she said what I thought was so beautiful. She said, no, my job as a leader is to get the best out of her. And if that means sometimes I adjust my style, she said, that's what I'm going to do. And I thought she just nailed it, right? That was so perfect.
Yeah. So it is a really interesting challenge that people run into all the time. People ask me routinely, who's supposed to change? And my answer to this, Margaret, is who's ever asking me the question. Because that's the one who's trying to move the relationship forward. You adjust. And if you adjust, then the other person's going to meet you somewhere along the way. Okay.
And they'll appreciate it. Actually, they'll know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you get more out of them, they're going to come a little bit more your way. If they feel a little more comfortable, they're going to be more willing to move a step in your direction. So I think if you don't put people in their comfort zone, you don't get the best out of them. And that is ultimately what a manager or leader is about, isn't it? Getting the best out of a broad range of people.
Absolutely. Okay. I agree.
All right. Margaret, if so the book again, Margaret Andrews today, the book is Managing Yourself to Lead Others. Margaret, if people wanted to find you, where's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, well, I'll give you two. One is LinkedIn. I do, that's really the only social media I really use. And I am Margaret C. Andrews. Turns out there are lots of Margaret Andrews on, on LinkedIn, but maybe only one or two Margaret C. Andrews. So that's probably good. And then through my website, which is margaretandrews.com. So you can sign up for, book recommendations and that kind of stuff as well.
Fabulous. I love the conversation. I particularly love the 6 questions because I think when you take the deep dive into yourself, you come to a deeper interaction, a deeper understanding of your own preferences, biases, limiting beliefs, a whole range of things. And it allows you to ask a question at the end of that. Is this the picture I want? Is this the leader I want to be or the leader I don't want to be? And just to repeat that, because I think it's really worthwhile for everybody, is who shaped you in your life and your thinking? What are the situations and events that have shaped you, whether lucky or unlucky, accidental or on purpose? How do you define success personally and professionally? What are really your values? Translate what gets you really mad when it happens. It's a great one. How well do you understand your emotions and how they appear in the world, often before you know what it is you're thinking or feeling? And then what feedback have you received privately or professionally? 6 great questions that'll let you address then what is the kind of leader I am and what's the kind of leader I want to be and how do I get to where I want to be. Margaret, great conversation. Really enjoyed it today.
Thank you. Me too. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Please check out our website, outofthecomfortzone.com. You'll find all sorts of resources there. And also check out our brand new YouTube site. You'll get some short clips from this, some additional materials. It's Out of the Comfort Pod on YouTube. And join us next week for another episode in Getting Out of Your Comfort Zone.
Thank you for joining us today. Tune in for another edition next week with Dr. Wanda Wallace on the Voice America Business Channel. Reach outside your comfort zone this week.